Looks like they experienced a technical glitch, so I'm just going to entertain you guys while we wait for them. I'm Colin, behind the scenes, if you guys don't know me, and welcome to Generational Change. You can smash that like button while we wait here and share this where you can on social media. It helps get this out to more people. Got a lot of stuff they're going to be going over today, including some fun stuff of Nancy Pelosi that I hadn't even seen until Peter had sent it to me, and that's was some fun video that they're going to be reacting to that I'm sure Jen hasn't seen yet, as well as we're going to be having guest Shahid Buttar on. As if you guys remember, he had ran in San Francisco for the chair or for the position that Pelosi is in, and also, or at least that's where I remembered him from back in the day. And I know he's an activist and all that, as well as Jayden D'Onofrio will be joining us. So a lot of cool stuff lined up, and hopefully Jen and Peter will be back soon. I assume just had to restart their computer or something like that. But yeah, so a lot of cool stuff happening today. Oh, geez, you guys can't hear me. Oh, you guys can hear me? Double check just to make sure, because it shows my audio is coming through. Thank you, Double K, for the super chat. Yeah, Colin. Appreciate that. Okay, your mute was on. I was like, oh no, that was a lot of talking for there not to be audio. But Double K, thank you so much for the super chat. And also, Big Dumb Animal had sent a $4.99. Cannot watch live, but sending a super chat because I can predict the future and the show will be / is great. Really appreciate that, and it will, because I know over at Status Quo we've interviewed Shahid Buttar several times, and he's always been really cool. I've really liked his sort of policies and message he sort of put out. And he was sounding the alarm on Pelosi as loud as he could. A lot of people were sounding the alarm on her, but he was actually taking action, trying to do what he could to fix the issue, because as a lot of people are now, for some reason, just now finding out she's quite an interesting fella behind the scenes and now in front of the scenes. But I'm also keeping up with your chat here, making sure you guys are all doing good. But yeah, once again, smash the like button and share this. And hello to the viewers over on X and Rumble as well, wherever you guys are watching. But Yeah, so I will real quick. Let me text Peter. And real quick, see where they're at. But yeah, so hi everyone. Let me actually just talk to the chat here. Got a lot of cool people. Obviously, got Chris Garrett. Good to see you as always. We got Holly Horn. A lot of cross pollinators from Status Quo, which is great to see. And we got, yeah, you don't like my music. Gave me a little bit of a fright for a second. And what else we got? We got Lenny. Hi, you actually seem newer. I feel like I haven't seen you in chat recently, at least. That could also, I might have just mixed it. But welcome to Generational Change. We're just once again just waiting for Jen and Peter to come on, and then once again they'll also be talking with Shahid Buttar and Jayden D'Onofrio about a variety of subjects, including we're going to be also reacting to some very insane Nancy Pelosi clips. If you guys remember last show, actually we had reacted to. Actually, I'll play it now. I have it right here. They protesters who had interrupted Pelosi. There's been a lot of movement for free Palestine across not just America, but the entire world. As you guys have seen, we've covered here on Generational Change, these sort of movements popping up. And over in Status Quo, we've been covering the on the ground coverage of the strikes in New York City and Washington, D.C., which Jen also attended the march on D.C. as well, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, she and John, our cameraman, weren't able to meet up, but there was quite a lot of people there. But basically, so this has been a huge movement, and now it's finally up to Pelosi's doorstep at an event. So let me real quick replay that clip to get you guys back up to speed.
Nancy Pelosi, you are complicit in the Israeli crime of genocide. I'm an Iraqi refugee, and I watch your government. You represent kill 1 million of my people. You killed 70,000 Afghans, and now over 30,000 Palestinians have died due to your complicity. We demand an end to the Zionist occupation of Palestine. We demand an end to the 17-year-long brutal siege of Gaza to be lifted. We demand an end. End the occupation now. 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 Free Palestine.
So yeah, so that was that. I'm actually not quite sure what event Pelosi was speaking at there, but yeah, those protesters were then escorted out, and so you would think that would be kind of the end of it. Hopefully, with something as delicate as a war and a literal genocide happening against the Palestinian people. But Pelosi just had to have some words to say about this event. Let me real quick. One, Chris Garrett says, don't forget Tony D and Ray J. I guess I didn't scroll up far enough, but hey, Tony and Ray J, good to see you guys coming over here as well. And there you are, Ray J. And Double K, thank you so much for the second super chat for $9.99. Calling the real backbone of Status Quo in these podcasts. On the technical side, maybe, but I just help facilitate what message would already be going out anyways. But excuse me. But yeah, so like I said, Pelosi just couldn't keep her mouth shut. I'll play this clip for you guys as a little preview, and then you guys will get to, for your enjoyment, get to see this clip twice, except the second time you get to see Jen and Peter react to it, which will be much more entertaining. But this is what Pelosi had to say in regards to that when she was on the State of the Union on CNN. Yeah, this is. I don't have cable, so I don't watch CNN or any of this stuff. So whenever I see these clips, it's so gross. But yeah, let me play this for you guys real quick, and let's get your guys' reaction while we wait for it, and then you guys get to watch it a second time.
They're in front of my house all the time. So I have a feeling for what feelings they have. But we have to think about what we're doing. And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people who don't have a place to go. So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see. Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some, I think, are connected to Russia. And I say that having looked at this for a long time now. As
you think some of these protests are Russian plants?
I say they're plants. I think some financing should be investigated. And I want to ask the FBI to investigate that.
Yeah. So one, I'll be straight up. I had maybe I'd missed this, and because I was too focused on the specifics of people dying in Gaza and all that. I was not aware Russia had anything to do really with this conflict as far as trying to influence it one way or the other. Maybe they had picked somewhat of a side, but I wasn't aware that they were taking that active a role. The only people taking the most active role currently is America. So I wasn't aware of that connection. So once I heard that, I was like, wow, apparently RussiaGate's still going strong. And that's I saw that and I genuinely thought what are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I genuinely was in shock the first time I saw that of how she got from A to B. And I also love the fist pumping of this is Putin's message. This means I'm right and intellectually superior. That is always fun. And also, yes, the kitty was in the corner. Oh, now he's in the really far back corner all the way out in our living room. Or that's a different kitty than earlier. I have several kitties. And yeah, I have a feeling for what feeling they have. That might be more so due to just her inability to properly. I think she's getting to that point where she's starting to have that sort of speech issue. But that comes with age. But yeah, so now claiming that protesters are linked to Putin directly, which actually goes in contrast to something she said quite earlier back in October when these attacks first happened and protests were first popping up. Code Pink had actually confronted her. Oh, hello, guys.
You know, the one thing that we said, and of course, as you can imagine, terrible internet connection issue. We're hopeful that it's going to stick.
I'm not. He might be hopeful. I'm not. I have no hope. And our lighting also doesn't work. So
yeah,
we're a little dark.
Yeah, we're a little dark, but you know, like I said, I think we'll survive.
Yeah, our lighting's not working.
So
I was just getting them up to speed on Pelosi shenanigans.
I have
a lot to say about Nancy Pelosi.
You know, we all have a lot to say about Nancy Pelosi.
Oh my God.
But
my main question is for you.
Yeah.
Is it the Chinese or is it the Russians? Who is the one in charge of asking for the ceasefire?
Well, you know, we typically have different methods that we go about to make sure that these things get scrambled up every once in a while.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? But watching her say that protesters should be that the FBI should open an investigation. I agree, Nancy. The FBI should open an investigation, but it shouldn't be into them. It should be into you. Yeah. I think you project a lot of your filth and corruption onto other people.
Well, let's not dig into that right now because we have.
I have so much to say to Nancy Pelosi.
I don't want you to have to start with that right now.
All right.
Double K, thank you so much.
And you're right. No, Colin's the best.
He is.
He's the best.
That's why we even said while we were having the internet connection issue that I guarantee you Colin's probably holding it down for the team.
Yeah, he's the best.
You know, the MVP behind the scenes, as they say. And again,
okay, but the question is, did he do the opening? We don't know.
We don't know. We will never know.
We'll have to go. No, we'll go back and look.
Big Dumb Animal cannot watch live, but sending a super chat because I can predict the future and this show will be great.
Thank you. We're working on it. And we are definitely going to be speaking. We have plenty of Nancy Pelosi talk for later.
Well, we have to talk about, because let's be honest, Nancy Pelosi represents the past, the very far past, the past that should have been the present.
You know, you say that, and yet I just watched AOC tap dance in a way that would make the 90s be just so
Can
proud.
we talk to our guest without talking about this now?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you want to talk about with who, but I'm angry.
I'm sure he's as angry as you are.
Let's see.
Because in the state of Florida, we're going down by the head, and there isn't much to cheer about. We did get one House seat flipped. I mean, everything counts, right?
We did. And the truth is that we could potentially have gotten a lot more seats flipped if our state party actually wanted to.
Well, there is somebody who is working to change those fortunes, and he represents the generation that unfortunately is going to have to pick up the slack for a lot of the shit that's gone on for all these years.
It's the Gen Zers.
He is running Florida Future Leaders, a Gen Z PAC. You don't see too many of those. Friend of the show, Jayden D'Onofrio. Welcome back to Generational Change.
How we doing? Thank you for having me. Glad to be back with you all. I'm doing good. I'm alive, surviving. I'm a little bit cold up here in Tallahassee, though.
I was going to say, you're at FSU.
It's in the mid-50s here. It's probably pretty cold up there.
It makes me so happy, though. Like, I love it because it's seasons. It's this. I feel like we're supposed to have seasons, and it's weird to me that we've created a life in a place that doesn't have seasons.
Yeah, that's how we do it here in Florida, I guess. I don't know. I kind of hate it. But you know what? I'm a little bit cold up here right now.
I know, but I'm glad you're up there because I know there's something big going down tomorrow. Are you in any way participating in that?
Well, my role tomorrow, I'm going to be at the committee meeting for the they're trying to lower the age for assault rifles here from 21 to 18 again. So, amazing legislation, of course, coming out of Tallahassee. That's what I'll be involved with tomorrow. So, we have so much legislation we have to fight back on. I mean, one thing, that I just mentioned, but also we have legislation that's like basically rolling back workplace environment rights for children and teens here in the state of Florida that have existed since like the Industrial Revolution.
Right, like child labor law problems.
Yeah.
Right? Like
so
ridiculous things.
Ridiculous. So we have, obviously tons to fight back on, not only this session, but every session. And I've said this time and time again, I think youth are always in the front of the minds of Republicans right now for these past few legislative sessions. It's been no secret that they want to make sure that we feel the pressure, whether it be on education through things such as the Don't Say Gay bill or, some of the legislation that we're seeing regarding DEI or even, voting rights. Last session, we saw SB 7050, which was a bill that was essentially in its original form, trying to eliminate tens of thousands of college student voters here in the state. So we have some awful stuff going on here in Florida.
Yeah, we had Anna Escamani on, was it last week?
Yes.
Last week. And so she's definitely one of our faves and is always up there fighting the good fight. And she said that there's a lot of stuff that's brewing up there. And I know a lot of it is the not sexy stuff that we don't all hear about. But yeah, no, and I'm glad that you live there so that you could be participating in this. Somebody's got to be in Tallahassee. I can't drive there. It's way too far.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like the Capitol is literally like a few blocks away from me. So I just take that walk and I'm there. I'm ready to start hating on these people and telling them what's the business. We got to keep our people, accountable. That's what it comes down to. No matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. And that's truly what I believe in no matter what, each and every day.
It's unfortunate, but as we know, issues like anything that's related to the culture war is a very, polarizing, dividing issue, especially in Tallahassee. But what isn't dividing is the fact that the cost of living in this state is out of control, especially when it comes to rent, when it comes to insurance, all things that unfortunately Gen Z will probably never experience because owning a home just is, completely in the rearview mirror now. Yeah. And because the rich basically don't have to pay any taxes in the state, they get every loophole known to man, where basically they can just pass along all of their inheritance to their family and just create insane amounts of generational wealth, but while at the same time, leaving millions upon millions of people out in the cold. And we are one of the more unique states. We're the third most populous. We have a growing population. And we're limited in terms of the geographic regions within the state within which people can live. So this almost seems like it's going to burst at the seams at any moment. And I can only imagine what that's like in Tallahassee. Can you talk about the economic impact of what that's like right now?
Yeah, when you guys graduate, how are you going to eat?
Yeah, really.
It's
going to be cooking.
It's ridiculous here in Florida. I mean, the affordability crisis is no joke. Just being upfront. I mean, I think we all feel it at the end of the day, but especially for youth. Like I have my first apartment, right? I'm here in college in Tallahassee, paying for my apartment, and it's a lot. As a college student, it's insane. But then trying to envision being able to own a house is like a whole nother ball game with the insurance crisis that we have going on here in the state of Florida. It's just impossible to live with, especially when we have a governor and a government that just doesn't want to take that issue head on. And it's unfortunate, and it's going to be something that we continue to deal with. I mean, look, I keep saying, some of the biggest things that are going to be important to youth in this election here in Florida is going to be recreational marijuana, because that's going to be on the ballot. We're going to see abortion on the ballot. These are going to be two of the biggest things. And then number 3 is going to be affordability. And a lot of people look at me like that's crazy. But in reality, it is insane the way we're living right now here in Florida with the affordability crisis. And I think it goes unnoticed how much youth care about it. One of the things, I don't know if you all saw this last year, Senator Jason Pizzo went on a college tour. And I was there with him for most of this ride. And every single college brought up the affordability, the lifestyle that they have. And even on things such as the insurance crisis, you wouldn't think a college student is really thinking about the insurance crisis, but they are, because that's what we're feeling. We understand that, like, if we don't confront this crisis, the affordability crisis, the insurance crisis, we are not going to be able to own a home until we're 30, 35, 40, whatever that number might be. Not anytime soon, unfortunately. So we got a lot to do on that front here in Florida for sure. And it goes back to holding our officials accountable. Unfortunately, we have an asshole governor here in Florida. I don't even know if I can curse on here. I think I can.
You can. Oh yeah, that's the last thing that's going to get us demonetized, I assure you.
Good. I mean, that we are, and he's back. So he's back here full time, obviously, with Governor DeSantis. And you know what? I think the other part to it, we don't know if he's going to be, burning down everything. Is he going to burn the house down? Is he going to make sure that we all feel it? The fact that he sucked in his presidential race, the worst presidential campaign ever. We're all going to feel that. And I have no doubt that we will, unfortunately. Yeah. But I think it's going to add more fuel to the fire for everyone wanting to make sure we change things here in Florida. And I think we're seeing that already.
Yep. I think that's a very good point. I also think that when it comes to DeSantis, he definitely intends to run for president again.
Oh my God, which is so absurd.
Foolhardy approach. He's probably better off primarying Rick Scott and trying to get into the U.S. Senate.
That and therein is the only competition for me, wherein Ron DeSantis would be preferable.
Yeah. Probably.
That would be it right there. And anybody who doesn't know, for us in Florida, Rick Scott is absolutely, he should be in prison. Oh, so yeah. he is the absolute. So again, I'm not a fan of DeSantis, but that would be the only race wherein I think that it would weigh for me a little in favor of DeSantis.
Yeah, there's a big difference between somebody who
talk about a lesser of two evils race.
But clearly we don't want it to come to that. In years past, in generations past, as bad as austerity politics and trickle-down economics have been since the days of Reagan, Ronald Reagan raised taxes when he needed to. George H.W. Bush raised taxes when he needed to. There's been this complete lack of attempt to hold the rich accountable since the days of George W. Bush, who in my opinion is the worst president of my lifetime. But that is translated into what we have seen, especially at the state level, like in the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis knows what he needs to do in order to change the fortunes of the state. He does need to tax the rich, but he's not going to do it. And so the problem just continues to permeate and get worse.
But you say it as if it's just him. Okay, let's be real. This isn't him. He is the cherry on top of an extremely ugly Tallahassee Sunday.
That is correct. I agree with that. And so this brings the conversation.
No offense, Jayden. I know you live there now.
I don't disagree. We've had our fair share of problems up here. Look, the insider part of it is like disgusting as well. You sometimes you can just hear about the drama of what's going on in just a few blocks down the road from myself. And it's like, really, are these people kids? You know, how did these people get into such an office trying to represent thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in some cases, and really not care about us? It's quite disgusting.
So I wanted to ask you, as we bring the conversation full circle, what is the goal? Because it sounds like you got off to a pretty good start with Florida's future leaders. What is the goal of the organization? Are there any particular races that you're singling out? And how can we potentially provide assistance in helping?
How can we help your organization?
Yeah. So I'm proud to say that it is the youngest led PAC here in the state of Florida. And it represents the Florida high school Democrats and the Florida college Democrats. And on our first day, we raised $20,000.
Nice.
$20,000 in our first 24 hours. And it's led by me. I'm the chairman. I'm 19 years old, and we have an all student team helping to make sure that we get things done. Our biggest goal is to make sure that we organize youth all across the state, particularly in areas where we can flip districts. And so those districts, range from Tallahassee to Orlando to down in South Florida, particularly in Palm Beach. I think in the last election cycle, and I've told a lot of people about this, is that we had 6 to 7 state legislative districts that we lost simply because the youth vote was so poor. And that's abnormal. That's something that was not what we saw in other battleground states in the last election cycle. But Florida lagged behind.
Where were those districts? I'm sorry. I'm just curious, where are you seeing, I'm curious where you primarily see a huge youth vote, because Florida, obviously there's areas that are not and areas that are.
Yeah. Senate District 3 is a perfect example. That's one of the only flippable state Senate district in this coming election cycle. Has FSU, 40,000 students. Okay. It has FAMU, that's 10 to 12,000 students. It has TCC, that's another 10,000 students. And then a ton of technical colleges in there. So we're hoping to fill that gap by being able to hire full-time campus directors on these college campuses and publicize the hell out of the issues of abortion and marijuana, both being on the ballot. I don't really see the candidates being the ones that really are going to turn out youth this election cycle.
You don't think?
Unfortunately,
you don't feel Joe is pulling out the youth?
Come on, man.
Look, we have 2 amazing issues that are going to be on the ballot this cycle, and those are going to be really the things that turn out youth, especially I think recreational marijuana and abortion are going to be college campuses are going to go crazy for those.
I haven't seen the marijuana amendment, and so I haven't read it. It obviously wasn't. Is it the same one that I signed? Is that the one that they got through?
Yes.
Okay, so then it is the one that I signed. So then it does allow homegrown. I think it allows 6 plants. I don't know. I have to. I don't grow my own. I just want to make sure that somebody can grow on my behalf.
Yes, get in on it though. I like it.
Well, no, I just want to make sure that it can't be turned into a John Morgan oligarchy of cannabis in the state of Florida.
I think the best thing that we have going for us right now in the state of Florida is that, the youth is all right. And with leaders like yourself, we can drive the car in the right direction, which is what we need to do. Other states, particularly red states, Kentucky, Kansas, Montana, Ohio, they all passed the abortion codification. And this was an issue that still resulted in a red legislature, which is, it is what it is. But ultimately, it really made a difference in having those types of issues on the ballot. Much like in 2020, the state voted fairly comfortably for Trump, but we voted for a $15 minimum wage. This state will likely vote comfortably for Trump again. But if we have the opportunity to pass these 2 major ballot initiatives, I would assume that Florida Future Leaders is going to be at the forefront in making sure we at least get that taken care of.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we really have to look at too is we have a 60% threshold for amendments here in Florida. That's a massive, lift. And
yeah.
What I've been telling people is, look, I expect normal turnout from every demographic here in Florida. But in order for us to get past those thresholds, we have to have abnormal youth turnout because that is the demographic that truly cares about these 2 issues overwhelmingly compared to every other demographic. So if we don't turn out youth, we are not making those threshold requirements in my opinion. We have to make sure we have the resources to turn out youth all across Florida at these college campuses. Obviously, we have our priority colleges so we can flip districts, but we're going to be involved at every single college that we possibly can, because without it, we can't make these, amendments a real thing here in Florida. And we can't break these supermajorities.
Yeah, so we were asked how to donate. Guys, go to this. It's Jayden Call. It's Secure Act Blue. Donate. Jayden Calls. Is there do you guys have a website yet or social?
We have so our website is www.floridafutureleaders.com.
Okay.
You'll be able to see all about our PAC and who we're representing, our goals, and how you can donate through there as well.
But right now, you're not donating to candidates, right? Is that correct? Like right now, you guys are working to get kids out to vote on ballot initiatives. And you recognize the writing on the wall that candidates are not where it's at this year for Florida.
Correct. We are completely all for youth organizing. We are not going to give a single dollar to a candidate. We will support candidates in legislative districts so that we can flip some seats, but it is going to be solely through youth organizing, all of our work.
Excellent.
Yeah. You definitely have your ish together, my friend. Guys, make sure that you support Jayden D'Onofrio at Florida Future Leaders.
Yeah, it really is Florida's only hope.
Yes. Well, help us, Jayden.
Well, I mean, no, but it's true. Like, seriously, we need a lot of these people to die off, and we need the young people to take over.
And before you go, shout out to somebody who has good taste in music. We see rumors right above your head. Clearly, you know a thing or two about
Come on, let's go. Come on now.
We had this discussion the other day. You didn't agree with me when I told you it was like one of the greatest rock albums ever.
I did never not say that. Just happen to prefer, forgive me for being an 80s kid. I prefer Tango in the Night. But that's me.
No.
Yes. That's me.
Over rumors? Over rumors?
Ridiculous. That is just a millennial talk. We don't need that millennial speak.
Whatever you, Gen X, Gen Z.
That's right. Well, we're with you. Thank you so much, Jayden.
Thank you all. You have a good rest of your day, okay?
Talk to you soon,
so much.
brother.
Bye, all.
Obviously, somebody we think very highly of. Yes. He's been fighting the good fight in the state of Florida for a number of years now.
He's a great kid.
And of course, he's somebody who people of a certain age and makeup have turned their back on him, literally and figuratively.
Literally, he went to a local Broward DEC meeting where we met him, our local county party.
Tried to interject some thoughts of
and stood up extremely well-spoken. He was 17 at the time and was just trying to tell the board why maybe they're having trouble with the youth vote. And this is a very well-spoken kid, obviously. And the parliamentarian of our club literally crossed his arms and turned his back while Jayden was talking to them. That's why the Democrats have trouble getting Gen Z.
I think they have more than just that, but that's
okay. Well, right, but this was a kid who was actually interested in participating, and they wouldn't even listen to him.
Well, if anybody can speak to the issues within the Democratic Party, the one thing that the GOP always likes to do is single out San Francisco, California. For whatever reason, they seem to believe that that's the end-all, be-all of what's wrong in this country.
Well, if you need to point to any sort of problems and be able to blame blue people, then you need to point to California. So that's what they do. Whenever they want to blame, say the Democrats don't have their shit together. See, just look at this. So I just think it's one of those examples.
Well, I always feel, and there's one thing that the GOP is correct about, that it is right that you can blame the two of the three biggest states in the union happen to be red states, Texas and Florida. But that doesn't mean that the blue state of California doesn't have its incredible level of problems as well.
Oh, it's a shit show.
And as long as
talk about property value problems,
and as long as the queen bee continues to roam the streets and call people Russians in China.
No. We need to clarify that, and I'm glad that Shahid's coming on because I need to find out if it's either the Russians or the Chinese are the ones that are behind the scenes pushing for a ceasefire. I'm not sure. Nancy wasn't sure. She was blaming Russians. She told people to go back to China. That looked like Americans to me.
Maybe it's the Japanese. Maybe they're making the comment.
If my grandfather was here, he was like the Jewish Archie Bunker. He'd have some choice words for all these groups, but we'll just skip over that.
He ran for the United States Congress against Nancy Pelosi on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately, could not gain the traction we wished he would have. It is what it is. The queen bee reigns supreme. He is also an attorney and an activist and somebody who knows a thing or two about Nancy Pelosi and then some. He knows a lot about California politics. Shahid Buttar, welcome back to Generational Change.
Are you muted?
Maybe a slow connection.
He might have a slow connection, but he also might be muted.
Yes. Let's try.
Something is awry.
And check at the bottom of your screen where it says settings. If you click that, you can click audio and make sure you have the correct mic selected, because sometimes it selects the wrong one. And if it is, then the fail-safe is just refresh your page real quick.
Boy, this has been one of those nights.
We're having a day, people.
Yeah,
we're
we are.
having a day.
Chris is right. Internet gremlins.
I know. You know what? If I were a paranoid person, but I'm not. I'm just saying.
I
You know,
always feel like somebody.
Well, and this is the thing: is just because you're paranoid doesn't mean it's not true. Are you there?
Can you hear me now? No, not so much.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Coming in very faint.
Okay.
No, he's not funny. It's just a delay.
Sure.
It's great to be with you guys. Thanks for inviting me on and inviting my thoughts. There's a great deal to talk about, certainly.
Right. So, I mean, look, we obviously see all the Nancy Pelosi stuff, and I don't want to have it be where like, oh, there's a Nancy Pelosi story. We should talk to Shahid about this. But I think that it's obscene with her. It's just, I just feel like it's just unavoidable. It's like watching a train wreck. Like, I cannot look away from this. And the fact that people are still tolerating this is just fascinating. But I'm sure you saw that it's been the Russians and that somebody should go back to China.
It is amusing to witness her sort of make it up as she goes along. And it isn't in any way off brand. I mean, I've been saying this for the better part of a decade. You know, she is someone who has consistently undermined not just progressive interests, but even those shared broadly across the corporate Democratic Party. She's basically a Republican strategist leading the Democratic Party to its ruin, and the rest of the country along with it. I think, you know, in this latest headline, and just for people who weren't watching, she basically accused people who favor a ceasefire in Gaza of being foreign agents, because we apparently, by respecting international human rights, by giving a damn about the bodies like the International Court of Justice, which recently passed an interim ruling favoring South Africa's application to stop an unfolding genocide in Gaza, in spite of all those, the global opprobrium challenging the belligerents shared by Washington and Tel Aviv. You know, any of those voices, according to Nancy Pelosi, are, as you noted, opportunistically either Russian or Chinese agents, depending on who she's talking to and, you know, maybe what she had for breakfast that morning. And the part about it that I find most offensive is the resurgence of the new McCarthyism that we can witness unfolding around us. When Rashida Tlaib was censured a few months ago in Congress for daring to speak the truth in the early days of the genocide, it was striking to me at the time that so few people cared. You know, when I was lit on fire with an Islamophobic smear to protect Pelosi, the one time she's ever faced an electoral threat, or public calls for a debate in the 35 years that she's held her seat, you know, I see this pattern in terms of silencing dissent and trying to establish a narrative favorable to Wall Street and the Pentagon at all costs. And it's interesting to see who goes along with that narrative. And I'll leave unnamed for now, perhaps we get there later in the conversation, voices in Washington in whom a great many people placed a great deal of trust. And, you know, the daylight between their experience and those of us who were unwilling to go along to get along. And throughout all of that saga, you know, the co-optation of the squad, its neutralization, you know, the taking Bernie Sanders off the table, putting Biden in office, supporting his genocidal foreign policy at every point, Nancy Pelosi in Congress has been a critical, not lieutenant, she's been like a, you know, she's a general.
Yeah.
And that's an apt metaphor to use given how militaristic is the policies that she's endorsed, and this restriction on dissent that she's encouraging by labeling people with thoughtful concerns as, you know, somehow being influenced by something other than a sincere patriotism and a dedication to the human rights and national security, not just of the United States, but, you know, the people of the world subjected to Pax Americana.
Yeah, I just want to say, well, I mean, ironically, 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire. It's at least 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire, whatever it is. So the Chinese and Russian people to whom she's speaking, I don't know. But something about her that really bothers me in addition that I don't think anybody really addresses, I actually find her to be a threat to national security. I find the way that she conducts herself, I find the way she went to Taiwan, I find the way that she thumbs her nose at absolutely everything, that she doesn't stay in line anywhere with any international law. And now she's just sitting there saying that we should do FBI investigations into ceasefire protests. I think we should be doing FBI investigations into her. Like, oh, definitely there should be investigations. I'm all for investigations.
How'd you make all that money, Nancy?
Well, I find her to be, honestly, when she went to Taiwan, that was one thing. But I find much of her behavior to not just be like supporting wars. I find her to be taunting them. And I think that she is extremely cavalier about that stuff because obviously it doesn't affect her. You know, her kids aren't going to be going into war. She doesn't care. And in fact, she stands to make gazillions of dollars off of that.
I was just going to say, yeah, there's a self-interest that pervades members of Congress, you know, the insider trading millionaires who are sending young people off to die, or, you know, just subjecting young people and old people alike in other places to arbitrary state violence. That sort of in line with the point that you raised, Jen, in the conversation after your exchange with the impressive young man who was on just before me while I was waiting to join you.
Yeah.
Is as much as she, Nancy Pelosi, is a problem, there is a danger in personifying the otherwise and ultimately structural challenges that we face as people interested in human rights, as people interested in unwinding a bipartisan corrupt military industrial machine in Washington that grinds too many people into its gears, from service members who are missing limbs to military families who are missing fathers or mothers to entire families in Gaza that have just been completely wiped off the map. And it's easy. I want to bridge away from Pelosi just to address Biden here, because it's not just her. I mean, we're talking about Democrats writ large, and there's a presidential election in 10 months in which neither of the major party candidates are willing to face public debates. Neither of them are willing to respect the results of primary elections. Neither of them support human rights. Both of them are complicit in human rights violations, not just in Gaza, but along our nation's borders, where under Biden and Trump alike, tens of thousands of migrants with an international right to asylum, an international right to enter the United States and undertake a legal process to stay, tens of thousands of them are detained illegally. And I just had a conversation today with a Biden supporter talking about, oh my God, but the other guy's so bad. And, you know, my response to him was, say that to the kids who don't have families anymore because Biden's bombs took them from them. And, you know, the idea that a genocidal, and there's no question that Joe Biden is complicit in genocide at this point. I mean, what is unfolding in Gaza has been the object of international opprobrium. International judicial institutions have formally opined. And the only thing insulating Netanyahu is Biden. And at multiple points, he's claimed to have limited influence when ultimately it's Biden sending the weapons. And this isn't new either. He spent his entire career in Washington, the 50 years he spent there as a senator before gaining the White House. He was a tool for Israeli interests the entire time. And to your point about threats to U.S. national security, many of the Pentagon's policies enforced by a corrupt Congress to skew U.S. foreign policy, not just in the Middle East, but particularly there, have been undermining U.S. national security for decades. Torture by the CIA never enhanced U.S. national security. All it did was invite worse human rights abuses to be committed to our soldiers who might be taken by enemy combatants. Any of the wars that we've undertaken, none of those advanced U.S. national security. They just ultimately undermined our standing in the world, degraded the readiness of our armed forces, drove U.S. military service members and their downrange targets alike to early graves, and enriched a bunch of military contractors. That's been the result of every policy decision in Washington, and, you know, from the serial interventions across Latin America, the proxy war in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza. None of that advances U.S. national security. The idea that the defense establishment has any relationship to national security, it's roughly the equivalent relationship that the Democratic Party has to democracy, which is to say claiming a value while systematically undermining it in every conceivable context. And, that's true of Pelosi, it's true of Biden, it's true of the entire corporate Democratic Party. And it is particularly telling that in the year of a presidential election, there is no choice on the ballot other than minor party candidates, and there are a few by whom I'm excited. There's, the major parties don't offer Americans a choice to dissent from militarism. And it's particularly striking if you rewind the tape and think about how in 2008, Obama wins the White House. Why? Because he was the anti-war candidate. That's how he got past Clinton in the primaries. When Trump comes to Washington and wins the White House, how does he get there? By claiming himself to be an outsider, that he's going to come drain the swamp. Americans want outside voices. And what are we stuck with? Choices among two very old white men, both of human rights abusers, both of whom have any number of seeming problems with their capacity, seeming problems with their, conflicts of interest. And, what kind of democracy is it that gives people those choices with no opportunities to shift them? And, the idea that Kamala Harris is already one heartbeat from the presidency without being able to win a single state's primary, including the state that she's from, that's laughable in the first place. But the idea that they might bring her back.
No, they can't bring her back. She's like, look, I don't think Joe can win. So I actually don't think he can win. So I don't.
There's no question. He shot himself in the feet over the last 3 months by embracing a genocide. He lost the youth vote. He lost the Arab American vote. He lost the votes of anybody who cares about human rights or is looking up to recognize the context of the fascism we are already living in. And go on, please. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I wanted to get back to what we were talking about, the McCarthyism issue, because something that I recently said.
Colin, cue up the two Pelosi videos.
All right, but just hold on. I just want to say, because something that I recently said that I saw, and it was profound. It was not me who said it. It came up a few years ago, but I saw a video of a Jewish man, anti-Zionist, saying that anti-Semitism used to be somebody who hates Jews, and now it's somebody who Jews hate. And he said it a lot more profound than that, by the way. But
that's pretty powerful. The way you
it is, and it's very, very true. Okay, and I'm not saying there's not real anti-Semitism, but when we're talking about it in this McCarthyist type of situation, and I look at the legislation that, like my congresswoman, where they're saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and this is where I feel like you as a constitutional person, it's like, how is that even possible? And they all signed it. It's like 2 + 2 = 5. And they all just said, sure, okay. And they just signed their names to something that's completely factually incorrect. And we all just are going about our life like that with our entire First Amendment rights. Just basically, that's it. You can no longer express that opinion.
This is how democracy dies. And I want to single out the particular moment. It was maybe a month ago when the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and I can't recall the third school were summoned before a congressional committee.
MIT.
Thank you, MIT. One of them was pushed out of a position, and let's just zoom in on the exchange in Congress that was completely misrepresented in the mass media, that was completely misrepresented in the American consciousness. What they were asked, they were asked if calls for intifada represented basically fighting words of the sort that would allow constitutional restrictions on that sort of speech. And in that exchange in Congress, the word intifada is presumed to mean genocide by a bunch of people who are completely contorting, distorting, misleading, twisting the meaning of the word. It's about ultimately liberation. And the idea that liberation for one people is automatically acquainted such that there's no public discussion about the conflation with genocide of another it would be offensive, except we're so far past that point that it is, kind of useless to even use the term or summon the emotion. I mean, there have been so many worse outrages since, from the daily bombings to its escalation, the misrepresentation, Israel, investigations confirming that Israeli commanders knew about the October 7th attacks before they were happening and ignored them. Independent documentation that Israeli commanders were ordering shelling of positions where they knew their hostages were being held to avoid the political inconvenience of having to repatriate them. There's just so many even Netanyahu's attacks on the independent judiciary in Israel preceding the escalation of the genocide, right? I mean, we are talking about ultimately from there to Washington. As we're talking about the election, being a pale representation of democracy, this disrespect for human rights around the world. What we are talking about is the rise of autocracy and the loss of human rights. The international human rights regime that we fought a world war 3 generations ago to establish, we are losing to Washington. And the unwillingness of our political system to tolerate or even consider dissent, and the failures of our mechanisms of democracy to ensure it. And, you know, we see this not just within the electoral sphere, but the judicial one as well. You know, you think about Dobbs and the loss of reproductive rights. You know, even if you rewind the tape, the composition of the Supreme Court going back to the Bush versus Gore decision, you know, the court contrived its future composition. There's been this thread of autocracy running through U.S. history for the last generation. And so many people, particularly comfortable liberals, have been willing to turn a blind eye to it. And, you know, I've been screaming bloody murder about the rise of fascism in the United States since I was in law school in 2000. And it is, you know, I really wish I were proven wrong more often, because, you know, the things I've been warning about are not things that bring me any joy.
No, when did you graduate, Shahid? Because I graduated in 2000 from law school.
Okay, I came out in 2003. So my law school years were the very first thing that happened in the broader body politic as I was studying what passes for law in this country, was the Supreme Court stepping out of line and picking the presidency, and everyone going along with it. You know, the Supreme Court and Fox News ultimately. And then, you know, by the time I left law school, that was the spring of the invasion of Iraq. And by that point, I'd kind of ditched my education and just gone, you know, fully immersed in the sort of direct action movement to try to stop the war. And then I was remixing that and my creative work and my legal work in Washington, and I did all that for 15 years before I went back to San Francisco and ultimately challenged Pelosi for the election starting in 2018. But, you know, all that's behind me. I want to riff on one thing that you brushed on earlier. It is funny to me how many people, you know, start, you know, citing me as soon as Pelosi does something outrageous. And, you know, it's gotten to the point where I just roll my eyes and I'm like, I tried to tell you people, so not you guys, but like writ large. None of this is surprising to me. I mean, if anybody paid attention, they would expect this.
Right.
But nobody pays attention. You know, the press isn't here to promote transparency or accountability. They're here to build cults of personality and insulate power. And I discovered that the hard way.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why I've kind of moved on from politics.
You know that. They're there to protect capital.
All right, we're going to play a clip, 2 clips. Pelosi can't decide whether it's the Russians or the Chinese.
We have to play it for our people. It's embarrassing.
But you get an idea of what happens when you basically don't take the keys away when it's past due. But that's to decide.
She needs to reboot. She's like, Russians or the Chinese? Is it the It's on like a computer.
All the time. So I have a feeling for what feelings they have. But we have to think about what we're doing. And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people.
She's got that part right. She's good.
Address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message.
There it is.
Like, I don't know how insane you really have to be, because, again, the whole point is that she's talking out of 2 sides of her mouth. On the one hand, we have to, sorry, I can't help it.
I hate it. You don't do women well.
The violence is terrible, but you are also Putin's puppet. It's like, what, lady? What are you doing? Like, at some point,
she had it right. Like, if it had ended there, it wouldn't have been so bad, right? But the fact that her 80% of her own party is demanding a ceasefire, so it's not even like it's some fringe thing. That's how ridiculous she looks.
I don't understand why ceasefire is this. They treat the word ceasefire like they treat the word socialist.
Well, the truth is, it's the
or intifada, for that matter, right? I mean, these are terms: socialism, capitalism. These are all terms. Democracy. These are terms that they distort in the service of their own corruption. I mean, to the point that we raised before, no one should be surprised by this either.
No.
You think about Medicare for all. That was a policy that a majority of those bipartisan majorities favored that policy. And who kept it from becoming the subject of a vote in Congress? Nancy Pelosi, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the NSA surveillance machine, she could have stopped that at about 20 different points in time. She was the chair of the House Intelligence Committee before she became the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
In both of those capacities, she could have stood up for constitutional rights. And in neither of them, at any point over the decades that she held those roles, did she do so. At least you could say about Dianne Feinstein that she showed up for work once. when she was fighting the CIA over the torture report, but like, which incidentally has never been released still to this day.
It doesn't count. That you're being very generous. You're being extremely, extremely generous.
Nice.
No,
I appreciate that.
This is so absurd to me with her.
Well, not over yet.
Oh, good
Mr.
God.
Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see.
Yes,
Same
Putin
thing
wants
with
ceasefire.
Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protests.
Can I just say, if Putin wants a
genuine,
ceasefire, can we have that
and
message?
sincere. Some I think are connected to Russia, and I say that having looked at this for a long time now, as you know.
You think some of these protests are Russian plants?
I say they're plants. I think some financing should be investigated.
I think so too.
First of all,
I think we should investigate a lot of financing.
Listen, there's a lot of bad people in corporate media, but Dana Bash is a certain level of scum. Like, she really loves this role that she plays.
She has such a horse face.
And you of all people.
Let me tell you something. Everybody, all women are either monkeys, birds, or horses, and that's a horse face
Are
right
you
there.
like drunk and high? Like, what's
No,
going on
I'm being
here?
very serious.
You
She's
get
got the
on
Carly
my ass.
Simon horsey face.
You get on my ass whenever I say anything critical of women who actually deserve the criticism.
But I wasn't being mean. Putting out
I think that
Simon face.
Oh.
I'm just saying. Go
the
on.
point being is that Dana Bash is all too ready, willing, and able to play the female version of Jim Acosta and go right along with whatever the corporate talking point is.
Oh, okay. So Russians.
So we had to listen for 4 years. And listen, Shahid, you probably know this pretty well. Jim Acosta and Dana Bash have reputations for being absolute jerks of human beings. Yet, because they don't like Trump, and because Trump went, "You're totally fake news, Jim Acosta, you're really terrible," and they go on Trump's ass because he's the most guilty party, yet at the same time, you don't realize that if Trump really was the outlier, that would be one thing, but he's not. He's merely a symptom of the whole rotted system. The way that Dana Bash had the audacity not to say, with all due respect, former Madam Speaker, even though she still acts like she is the Speaker, how can you be so sure that the protesters are being funded by Putin or supporting Putin? She says they were probably supported by Putin, right? It's like the difference in language is so clear in terms of the message they're trying to put out there.
So let me ask you, if Putin in fact was supporting and financially supporting for a ceasefire, would that be a problem? Like, and why and how in which that would be a problem? I'm not understanding. What do you think?
Well, I mean, there are legal restrictions on foreign monetary support, at least for election candidates and formal campaigns.
Yeah.
That's a legal restriction. I think foreign support for domestic social movements is, it's a different category altogether, though certainly it invites any, number of, it creates a broad political attack surface, let's put it that way. I mean, the part I would want to focus on here is—
You have to make me finish listening to this.
Well, this isn't the end.
Okay.
Because this is her saying that it's the Russians' fault. Now we're going to see that, according to Medea Benjamin's Code Pink, they're representing China's interests now.
Most of your constituents walk beside you. Stop the genocide. Stop the Holocaust.
By the way, can I just say the fact that she is where—
Did you see that?
We all know.
Oh my God.
We all know where they caught her. They caught her on her way to the San Francisco 49ers NFC Championship. She probably was sitting in the owner's suite.
Of course she was.
Guaranteed.
Well, that's what you get. That is where your head goes from this.
Because, she was wearing the 49ers sweater.
The point is, she was so dismissive. And then what was the comment? Go back to China?
Yeah, well.
And those
Democrats want the ceasefire. The Democrats want the ceasefire.
Did you see her hand
The
gesture?
Democrats want the ceasefire.
Did you hear something?
I know the voice of the woman who's on the tape there, and her action model is she bakes pies and brings them out to Pelosi's house. She's the most non-threatening person you could fathom. And the idea that Pelosi's response to her is to literally shoo her away. I don't know if you witnessed the hand gesture, but the expression of disdain.
Oh, so disgusting.
Common people, you don't belong in the Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Go away.
It's disgusting.
We often call Pacific Heights specific whites. Is the
specific
other way
whites
to—
is the slang.
That's
I'm
kind
not
of funny.
For those of you who don't know, Pacific Heights, San Francisco is one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world. And so, of course, that's where Pelosi
I don't
is.
think that she or any of the other people that are in those power positions should get a moment of peace when they're in public. And I've been saying this now. I do have a certain sympathy for Chuck Schumer's and Anthony Blinken's neighbors. I do, like, you know, they could have lived there first. Like I said, if Chuck Schumer moved in next to me, I wouldn't want to be woken up with pots and pans at 6 o'clock in the morning because he's a douchebag. But that's their, you know, let them take that up with their neighborhood watch, as far as I'm concerned. But these people should not get a moment's peace when they're in public.
No.
Not one. I don't care. And yes, I would follow Kirsten Sinema into a bathroom. I'd even stand on the toilet and look over the stall if she felt the need to ignore me.
We have a friend who actually did this to Wasserman Schultz once, and she said of all the people, and she has followed dozens and dozens of representatives, and she says, bar none, Wasserman Schultz is the nastiest person out of all of them. And I'm like, yeah, that checks out. So unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where, as has always been the fear, and I've always maintained that Trump's bark is a lot worse than his bite.
He's just the cold sore, people. He's just the sore at the end.
Like, if you really, there are people in this country who actually think in terms of what can be accomplished as commander-in-chief. Again, it's not the question of Trump being bad. It's the question of the underlings and the people like that sit on the Supreme Court, for example, that are the real problems. No, I'm not denying that. I'm saying that I don't think Trump's heart. Trump doesn't have a black heart like a Ron DeSantis does.
No, he doesn't have a heart.
Like, to me, that's a big difference between how much vindictiveness. Yes, Trump has a vindictive nature, but I don't see him doing the types of things.
I don't see him doing collective punishment.
Yeah, this is
at the level. I don't. And I'm not supporting him. I'm a Cornel West supporter. You guys know that. Like, that's where, and I'm hoping he gets on the ballot here. And if he doesn't, I'm going green.
And the whole problem,
whatever.
And the whole problem that I don't think a lot of people realize, and I'm sure you could speak to this, is that there really is no difference between President Blinken, as I like to say, and John Bolton. They're basically the same person.
Right.
It just so happens that Blinken is a more dignified person in the eyes of the liberal elites. That's the difference.
It's the facial hair.
Well, again, we're falling into the prey of the trap of personifying problems that are structural. Yeah. The reason you're seeing little daylight between these figures is precisely because there has been a bipartisan consensus in Washington for 75 years on international corporate resource extraction and armed military force to ensure the availability of foreign markets to U.S. corporations to monetize their assets. This is the story. I mean, just a quick history here for people who didn't figure out how we became so intractably opposed to Iran. It was because in 1953, Iran tried to take its oil fields off the international market, and the CIA responded by staging a coup.
Oh, yeah.
And the revolution that came predictably 20 years later, after the rule of a brutal U.S.-sponsored dictator, then left the country in the hands of right-wing theocrats. That's the result of U.S. foreign policy. And this pattern of machinations from Washington to Wall Street, undermining U.S. national security while claiming to advance it. Now, when we look at this continuity from Democratic to Republican administrations, I want to quote Ari Fleischer here. He was the press secretary for George W. Bush in his second term. And he gave this quote sometime in the early 2010s, well after Bush had left office. I think this was Obama's second term at this point. And he said, yeah, it must have been, because he said that Obama's presidency with respect to U.S. foreign policy was the third and fourth terms of the Bush administration.
Sure.
And, that should turn anyone's stomach, because we are talking about a murderous foreign policy that pays no respect for international human rights, systematically degrades them at every conceivable opportunity, insulates human rights abusers from torturers at the CIA to IDF commanders that are engaged, as you've noted, to collective punishment, have been since well before the October 7th escalation. There is no opportunity at the ballot box for we, the people of the United States, to curtail the corrupt military-industrial establishment that a former U.S. president warned us would destroy democracy in America. It's almost to the day. In fact, I guess it's 12 days after the anniversary of Eisenhower's speech in 1961, where he coined the term the military-industrial complex in the context of a warning to the American people in his last act as president, saying, this is going to come for you. I had to build this to fight the Nazis. It's still here. It has its own interests. Look out, because it's coming for you. That's what he warned us of. And what happened to his successor in the White House? He was killed in Dallas, 2 gunshot wounds, right? I mean, the idea that we have lived in anything like a democracy for the last several generations is laughable. And, you know, there's permitted dissent and debate and even potential change on domestic policy. But when it comes to how the empire rolls internationally, there is no debate permitted in Washington. And, you know, what happened to Rashida when she was censured in response to speaking out in favor of Palestinian rights is a perfect example of that, because both parties came together to marginalize her. And, you know, that's indicative of where we're at. And it's no surprise to me that Nancy Pelosi, the Trojan horse at the head of the Democratic Party, is not just mischaracterizing the position of the majority of her party, not just punching down at left, not just marginalizing kids who've lost their families abroad, not just inviting more human rights abuses, but in particular, doing this really nefarious tactic of equating dissent about U.S. foreign policy and human rights with foreign sponsorship. Now, that is straight out of an authoritarian playbook. And that shouldn't surprise anyone who's been paying attention to her.
No, it's dangerous is what it is. It's very dangerous. And it's one of those things that, you know, not necessarily here in the case of Russians, you know, but definitely in the case of Chinese people, where we see targeting and we see all sorts. And I'm not saying that people don't necessarily target Russians, but I don't think it's as obvious to know who's Russian and who's not Russian. But like, I feel like when you look at things like what happens against Asians, Chinese people specifically, or even what goes on in terms of, let's say, Palestinians or any sort of, Islamophobic nonsense that's going on here. And that kind of talk where you dismiss any sort of policy as somehow indicative of some marginalized or other group, I think is a cause for concern. And it's something that, regardless of what the group is, first of all, it's just stupid. But I just think it's dangerous. I think it's very dangerous rhetoric to be like blaming any sort of group or nationality for any one policy, let alone one that's a policy of peace. And I want to just say the word ceasefire is actually incorrect. I don't like that we're using that term anyway. Ceasefire indicates there's a war.
Well, the people on the left have a tendency to use terms that they don't even
they don't understand words. I mean, it's not really, we're just asking. And that's why the ICJ decision was not what people thought it would be. They were expecting them to call for a ceasefire, whereas we know that's not what they were ever going to do, because that's not in the purview of what they were asked to do, because that's not in the nature of their court decision. When people don't understand that, right, Shahid? They're like, why didn't they just tell them to cease fire as if they could just...
It's an interim ruling in the first place, so that very well might be the ultimate result of the process. I think there's been a lot of mischaracterization of the ruling, particularly because of its procedural import. It's not a final ruling. It's, the reason they issued it is because they see human rights being so threatened, and they recognize that the legal process will take so long that they called on Israel to try. The language was really tepid, but this idea that Israel is supposed to take all steps necessary to ensure compliance with the International Convention Against Genocide. Well, in order to ensure compliance with the International Convention Against Genocide, Israel would have to stop the mass bombing.
Correct.
And frankly, that is a call for a ceasefire. So I think the decision's been mischaracterized in all kinds of ways. And Washington and Tel Aviv tried to spin it, saying that the court didn't call for a ceasefire when it very clearly did call for all measures to be taken to prevent violations of the Genocide Convention, which are happening on a daily, hourly basis. Have been for 4 months now. And, the decision I have a lot of hope for, but no time soon. It will be ultimately an object of history and reflection, because that's how legal processes work. I'm in the 4th year of my lawsuit against the San Francisco Chronicle, trying to vindicate the opportunity for a city to have a legitimate congressional election for the first time in 35 years. Legal processes, and people are discovering this with Trump, legal processes are not just notoriously slow, but they are meant to be retrospective, which is to say, trying to seek justice for things that you fear in the future is fraught, especially when they implicate political actors. I mean, as long as we're on that, I fear the use of the legal system as a lever to try to neutralize the former president ultimately will be his path back to the presidency, precisely because Biden can't possibly win and the press refuses to platform alternative voices like Dr. West. The only voice in the election that could beat Trump is Dr. West, but he's under the thumb of the corporate media, so nobody knows who he is, and unless you pay attention to these things. And I shouldn't say that. Plenty of people know who Dr. West is, but I'm stunned at how many people who express concerns about politics who I talk to casually have no idea that he's running. Even people who are familiar with his voice, and it makes me want to bang my head into a wall, and it disproves the failure of our media institutions to promote the transparency on which democracy relies, which brings me back to a point I've been covering in my Substack column lately. Biden claimed on the 5th of January, on the anniversary of the eve of the anniversary of the insurrection, he claimed that democracy is on the ballot this year. And it's clear that that's not the case, because we lost democracy in this country a long time ago. And anybody who doesn't realize it yet has just not been paying attention. And I'm grateful for youth voices. I'm thinking about your preceding guests who are doing what they can to hold the line, to guard a future that, as far as I can tell, is pretty thoroughly compromised at this point. And I am also, I kind of mourn for the co-optation of their efforts at the outset by the failures of their predecessors. And I'm not just thinking about political predecessors. I have a particular to pick with the press, which has been complicit in all of this for decades. Every story the Pentagon wants to suppress, you will never see it on the pages of the New York Times, right? Any fake story the Pentagon wants to promote, it will be on the front page above the fold. And that's how the empire grew. That's how we got here. That's why we're in this mess. That's how the climate catastrophe got engineered. It's how the upward transfer of wealth was engineered. It's why so many people are suffering from economic insecurity at the moment, that entire generations are passing on the opportunity to have kids and their families. We are seeing demographic shifts as a result of the economic crises that this bipartisan predation on the American public in the service of Wall Street and the Pentagon has wrought. And when going back to where we started with this interview in terms of Pelosi and her role, she has throughout that process been an agent of the conservative wing of the culture, whatever political party represents it. And, it's particularly offensive when political parties that claim to stand on behalf of marginalized people get co-opted by oligarchs, but nothing about that should be a secret. And it just amazes me how many people are so oblivious that they remain so incessantly surprised when the very same figure so frequently reveals who she is. Yeah. When it was punching down at Ilhan Omar, when she was speaking out about human rights abuses, when it was punching down at AOC and defanging her. Ryan Grimm at The Intercept has a whole book about how Pelosi co-opted AOC and sort of like neutralized the voice of the squad, by punching down and left. And
Did you see, Alex? Did you see her tap dance? Did you watch that?
Did I see her do what?
It was a tap dance.
Colin, could you please cue up what I asked?
It was a tap dance wherein she wouldn't use the word genocide. She was questioned as to, is Joe Biden doing that? And she immediately pivoted. This is a girl that has been trained as if the 90s wants her back. It's actually really disconcerting to me to see that to her. It's like she's a pod person now. I'm having like Invasion of the Body Snatchers thoughts. Like she sat there. It was masterclass. It was like Pelosi level tap dancing.
Well, not to be outdone, I know this is a little small right now, but as you can see, Lindsey Graham hit Iran now, hit them hard. If only we could send Lindsey Graham off to fight. And that's
he's been trying to go there look, they all want to go into Iran. And but can we, before we talk about Iran, talk about the UNRWA problem and what's happening with that, and how it's not a coincidence that shit is coming down right now, the ICJ. Right. And for people who don't know, Israel released information, which, by the way, what do I always say? How do we know Israel's lying? Its mouth is moving. But anyway, they released information that I think 12 or 13 of UNRWA employees, and for people who don't know, it's the United Nations, I don't know what the RA part, but this is the service organization, the humanitarian organization. Refugee agency, thank you, that handles Palestinians in terms of West Bank and supplies them with everything from housing, from food, like just it's the people that take care of them because they are without country, because we won't let them have a country. So 12 or 13 people were apparently, according to Israel, involved in October 7th attacks. And therefore, the US and the UK have cut funding to basically the only lifeline that the Palestinians in the West Bank have. I mean, it's just off. And it is not a coincidence that this just happened to basically, in my mind, it's just to discredit the opinion of the ICJ. What do you think?
There's no question. This is all spin control. You know, it's like throwing up headlines to try to push other ones out of the public consciousness. Remember, these are the very same sources of disinformation that claimed falsely that babies were being beheaded. Right. I mean, and the sources of disinformation have included Biden himself. So, you know, frankly, I trust nothing that purports to justify anything that Israel is doing, because we know that there has been not just recently, but a long-standing torrent of disinformation from official sources, misrepresenting conditions on the ground, individual incidents, patterns and practices, conflicts of interest. I could go on. And you know, I want to come back particularly to the response from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to locations where they knew that prisoners were being held. And there is it was once a secret doctrine within the Israeli military that was formally repudiated, but seems very much to have been resuscitated in the wake of October 7th. And these were deliberate decisions to kill their own citizen, sometimes soldier prisoners, to avoid having to bargain for their lives.
Hannibal Directive. It's called the Hannibal Directive.
Hannibal Directive, thank you. And it is so revealing of the nature of the project here. Because it's not about, you know, if anybody was sincerely concerned about recovering the hostages, there are plenty of ways to have gotten there that would have gotten many more of them back alive. But that has never been Netanyahu's priority, never been Biden's priority.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be effective in drawing the U.S. into a conflict.
I kept saying, what would they have done? Let's say the Hamas fighters, let's say they went and they were hiding in a hospital in Tel Aviv. Do you think you would have approached it the same way? See, I think not. And I would also suggest that let's say I was told that there's 100 Hamas fighters. We know they're at the bottom of the Al-Shifa hospital. They're just hanging out there having a whole party. We know they're there, cameras. But there's babies upstairs. I'm still going to say no. So to me, it's like the fact of whether or not that is legitimate is irrelevant.
Not only are you going to say no, but you're obligated. Everyone is obligated under international law to which all of humanity is subject to say no. That is a legal requirement,
right?
That Israel violates with every single sortie that they're flying, with every single shell that's fired into a building. Every one of those are violations of international law.
But the problem is, it's not just as big of a problem as Pelosi and the Lindsey Grahams and the Mitch McConnells and the Chuck Schumers of the world, and I can go on, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's of the world. I don't think there is enough criticism, and I have been kind of, I've bitten my tongue a number of times when it comes to AOC. But there are many reasons why what she is doing in terms of running cover for the establishment, this is not only ruining her credibility. Forget that. That doesn't mean anything to me. You could do whatever the hell you want and sink your own career in thinking you're going to run for president and somehow get millions of people behind you. You're a fool. I mean, that. The real problem with people like AOC is that she is basically giving a complete lack of hope to people who want to change the system, who believe that fighting with it is actually worth it. If somebody like her, who is supposed to be, more or less the face of a future generation of political progressive leaders, she has been throwing that away for a number of years now. But what she did on the Sunday morning show, I mean, to me, and we're going to cue up the clip right now.
It's embarrassing. She should be embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
This is about as bad as anything I've ever seen, and it's.
You haven't seen this, Shahid?
She doesn't have the courage to actually.
I don't think I have. No, I'm curious.
It's
doesn't have a courage to actually take a stand on something, twisting herself into a pretzel, which not only hurts the movement, it makes you look like a coward. You don't even have the guts to actually put your foot down and stand on something. At least say, I support what Israel's doing. You could say a lot of things about Biden, but at least he's pretty crystal clear that he's a genocidal maniac. He's not tiptoeing around that.
Very little. But I think what is most important is saving these lives, ensuring the release of hostages, and in my view, negotiating a ceasefire.
Some of your colleagues, and we talked about what's happened at the protests this week have called the president Genocide Joe. Some of your colleagues have accused the president of supporting genocide, including Rashida Tlaib. Do you agree with that word, genocide, that the president's been supporting a genocide, or does that go too far?
I think what we are seeing right now throughout the country is that young people are appalled at the violence and the indiscriminate loss of life. We are not just seeing 25,000 people that have died in Gaza. We are seeing the starvation of millions of people, the displacement of over 2 million Gazans. We have South Africa that has mounted a court in the ICJ. The ICJ ruled this week that Israel has a grave responsibility to prevent genocide.
But they're still determining whether it's a genocide. Do you think that
they are still determining
given that it's still under investigation?
I believe that they're still determining it, but in the interim ruling, the fact that they said there's a responsibility to prevent it, the fact that this word is even in play, the fact that this word is even in our discourse, I think demonstrates the mass inhumanity that Gazans are facing. And so whether you are an individual that believes this is a genocide, which, by the way, in our polling, we are seeing large amounts of Americans concerned specifically with that word. So I don't think that it is something to completely toss someone out of the public discourse for using. But I think what we are seeing here is that the Netanyahu government has lost public support, and that we have a responsibility to protect the human rights and the humanity of Gazans and hostages alike in the area.
All right.
As far as
there you go. What do you think, Shahid? How is that for a tap dance?
There's a lot of prevarication there. I mean, on the one hand, I was grateful that she was naming some of the reasons that people describe what is happening in Gaza as a genocide, namely the displacement, mass starvation, collective punishment. So, she didn't shy away entirely from it. I'm reminded, particularly, Ryan covers this in his book, that she had early in her career, one of her first public stumbles was when asked about the Israeli occupation of Palestine, well before the recent escalation of the genocide. And, she sort of fumbled that question. And, it could well be the case that she basically learned the same lesson that Obama did when he was the president, which is that Americans don't care and there's nothing to be gained from standing for human rights. And, when he tried to close Guantanamo and stuff, and he got sold out by congressional Democrats within weeks of him reaching the White House, he ran for the right-wing hills ever since, and no one ever heard him talk about civil liberties after that, except to violate them more. I have a particular perspective here. So I ran for Congress in 2018, which was the year that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won her seat, and I won 1,000 more votes than she did in our respective races. Hers were enough. I think it was 16,000 were enough to take her to Congress. I won 17,000. That was enough for third place in my district. I came back in 2020, attempting to try to, support her and some of the other voices in the squad that had emerged as seeming alternatives to the corporate establishment, and then watched them over the course of that cycle basically side with the establishment over and over again. Since we started talking this evening about Nancy Pelosi, I'm particularly aware that when Pelosi was on the ropes, the squad backed her. They backed her for the speakership. They endorsed her reelection. At no point have they actually publicly crossed swords, even while she was publicly kicking down at them relentlessly. And the unilateral disarmament by voices in Washington who we, describe as progressive, their willingness to play along, their unwillingness to leverage their position, as they've had opportunities to do time and time again. They've had the margin among themselves to do things like deny Pelosi the gavel, absent a promise to, for instance, bring a universal health care proposal to the floor for a vote. These are tactical failures that ultimately enable strategic losses. And as someone who spent 20 years in Washington fighting long before I ever ran for Congress, only to watch relative neophytes find their way there on behalf of a movement that they care a great deal about, but maybe are not so equipped to represent, I you know, I work as a snowboard instructor now, and you know, I really do wish I could have done more to help. But at the end of the day, all I can do is write about this stuff, and I continue to do that. I'm pretty adamant about sharing my views, and I do that on Substack. I should note here also that when I look at the squad and its co-optation over the course of the last several years, I can't only blame them, because as much as they're making decisions to compromise their stated values and go along to get along, you know, take the easy road, the you know, perhaps minimizes their flag. Hey, that's not been true of all of them. I'm thinking about Rashida, right? She stepped out last fall.
Yeah.
And they went after her. Ilhan has done that many times in the past. It's kind of silly that they all get lumped together, because Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are far more assertive and willing to step outside that normal role and invite constructive tension, let's say, in the public discourse than some of their colleagues, right? And I also think here that there's a tension between movements as grassroots led, initiated, and pushed phenomena, and the work of insiders in Washington to try to represent them. And when movements identify too much with figures in particular, this is why I often push back against personalization when we're discussing structural issues, because there's a danger of just changing the face of it. That's what we did ultimately when we elected Obama, you know, and we got the 3rd and 4th years of the Bush administration. It's easy to think that in changing personnel, we are changing policy, but in fact, it's not always the case. And it is often very much the case that changing the personnel only entrenches the policy. And that's particularly true when we talk about handoffs between presidential administrations. It's part of how we got to this point where the Supreme Court, you know, signed off on the state secrets privilege, which allows the executive branch to do whatever the hell it wants anywhere in the world. Consequences, international human rights, the rights of American citizens be damned, right? Cover-ups galore. Like, Americans have no idea what is happening under our noses. I mean, I'm perpetually reminded, if only because, you know, in San Francisco these days, pretty much everything anyone ever talks about is crime. And I just remember the era when the CIA was running crack cocaine in the United States and killing police officers to wage its own foreign policy and jail a generation of slaves to then run the, you know, basically hire them out to corporate America as the last remaining vestige of America's manufacturing base. And Americans have no idea that this happened, even though it's all been publicly documented. Even people who claim to be thoughtful and pay a lot of attention have no idea that this happened. And we have conversations in public as if these things didn't happen, as if the CIA didn't torture some folks, as if Washington didn't export state terror relentlessly. And what we're seeing in Gaza is just an extension of that. It's nothing different than what we've been doing to the Dominican Republic, to Chile, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Korea, to Vietnam. Like, take your pick, right? Yeah. I mean, it's, in some respects, the aspect of this recent escalation of the genocide in Gaza that I find most surprising is the fact that Americans for once have shown up, right?
Well,
I mean,
the difference is that our Congress doesn't generally swear allegiance to any of those other countries like they do to Israel. We don't have anti-BDS of other countries in 36 states, right? So like the reason that we take such an interest in Israel, and also other countries are required for their lobbyists to register as foreign agents, according to my understanding. So Israel is so unique in that, and I know people like to say it's a tax dollar thing, but as MMT supporters, we know that it's not that, but it really is our collective resources and our country's name backing it regardless. So it's different in other countries. I don't think people feel that sort of betrayal of their Congress the way it is here, where it's like, are you kidding me? Who are you? And what's ironic really about it is the history of Jewish people, which you probably know this because you're very well read. But like one of the biggest reasons that Zionism even came about was this idea of Jews as being double agents and not being able to serve their European country. They're always going to be outsiders. They're always going to be Jews. And the only way that Jews really thought that they would have any legitimacy and be taken, have any sense of collective power would be to have a national state. That was the premise. Obviously, that's not how it went down. But so it's the same thing. It's like they really are just, yeah. We're in a really bad way right now. But yeah, that's what I mean. It's ironically now Jews are there. They've created this, but originally that wasn't the plan.
Well, and the historical irony of think about the role of the Second World War, both in the creation of Israel at the same time that the international human rights regime was established, with international institutions, which 75 years later we're seeing degraded by the very, the parallel object of that event's construction. In other words, Israel owes its existence to the Allied victory of the Second World War. Yeah. So did the international human rights regime that Israel is now destroying. Right. With American support. And so the idea that over the arc of history, we might see millennia of human civilization leading to ultimately only a 70-year period where the international community actually guaranteed to all human beings on Earth basic human rights, despite the potential violations of their own governments or neighboring governments. The idea that we got there in the 1940s, it probably, what I would describe as the sort of like grand achievement of human civilization to reach a point where the whole globe was promising security to everyone. And then to lose it to our own elected leaders, to me, it is stomach turning. It's revolting. It's one of the reasons why I feel ultimately like I was, dodged a bullet in having the opportunity to turn my sights away from Washington and do other things with my time in my life. The idea of being in Washington at a time like this, trying to fight defense against the, combined forces of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the entire press establishment, I did that as a candidate. And the idea of trying to do that as an elected representative, this is all going back to the questions you were raising about AOC. I don't know. I don't know to what extent the people who we describe as progressives in Congress, I don't know if they knew what they were signing up for. I think a lot of them thought that this is a democracy, that you run for office, you advocate ideas. If the public likes you, you go. And then there's like this, well-reasoned, well-intentioned debate among the people's representatives of what the policies are going to be. But it is a knife fight with a lot of capital, and militarism ultimately is the object of consensus. And so whatever advances militarism has greased rails, whatever impedes it has 1,000 spears in its face. And I am absolutely positive that for some of those voices, they have seen easier paths forward than the ones some of us might wish that they would take. But at the end of the day, it's just reflective of, what their priorities are, the unfortunate personification of movements that deserve better than to be reduced to personalities susceptible to co-optation and compromise. And I would hope to see a new generation of grassroots leaders emerge from this era of dissent, challenging the latest round of militarism from Washington. And if it's not the elected leaders in Washington, in whom we can have any faith, hopefully at least it's some voices for peace in the grassroots who are doing the important work. You mentioned earlier, Medea Munzman comes to mind. She's someone who's been raising her voice against militarism for decades. I can think of any number of other people from coast to coast. There are tens of thousands, I think hundreds of thousands of us, millions of us probably. And we deserve a voice, and we're not getting it from the people who we elect. And so I would say if there's any overarching point I would want your viewers to take away, it is the need for all of our voices to be heard, including your own. And, whatever your pathways are to public expression, pursue them, whether that's creative, whether that's direct action, whether that's organizing. This is not a time to keep our concerns to ourselves.
No, and did you say you're teaching snowboarding? Where are you living?
I live in Lake Tahoe, California. Yeah, and I'm a snowboard instructor and a DJ. That's how I make my living these days. And I frankly couldn't be happier. I'm kind of living my adolescent fantasies, having been sort of saved for my aspirations.
You're living in a beautiful mountain place around a gorgeous lake, teaching snowboarding, and you couldn't be happier. That's so shocking to me. Why would that happen? Yeah. Oh my God! I love Tahoe. I think it's gorgeous there.
Come visit. Holler at me. We'll ride together. It'll be great.
Shahid, thank you so much for coming on this evening.
Thanks,
guys,
Shahid.
If you are not currently subscribed to Shahid's Substack, make sure that
check it out.
Do.
Links in the description,
Links
guys.
in the description. And of course, keep fighting the good fight. But seriously, I'm sure you're living your best life.
Oh,
right now.
I wouldn't live there. Thanks,
Come visit me. It'll be a party. Great to see you guys. Keep up the great work.
Bye.
Good people. Very good people, and obviously fighting still fighting the fight. And he was obviously very appreciative that we asked him to come on. And let's face it,
I love him. He is so chill.
There were a lot of things that went down. Danny, thank you as always. We didn't get into the MMT conversation, but somebody who.
But Shahid's in on that. Like, he knows that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
He wouldn't argue against that.
So one story that we do have to cover before we go is, again, RFK.
What did he do?
He didn't do anything. It's just the reality of how this is going down, because he does have a lot of support, and he is intending.
So he's running as a
run
libertarian
for president of the United States, but now is strongly considering running as a libertarian.
Did we ask her that when she was on the other Angela?
We did bring it up, but it wasn't.
Guys, we had Angela McArdle on the other day, who is the chair of the National Libertarian Party, and we did talk with her. But this definitely wasn't something that we were able to confirm. That is so gross.
It is very true, Red Cloud, that the DC Dems, but just the federal Dems in general, are really the ones who move heaven and earth. You see, it's funny, with the GOP, they really are only concerned about the Democrats. The Democrats are concerned about the Greens and the Independents.
The Democrats are concerned with everybody because they have nothing. Yeah. Now, RFK, first of all, I said in the very, very beginning, if you remember, I said he should run as a libertarian. I said it a long time ago. I said as soon as he started this, he should be running as a libertarian. Then he decided he was going to run independent. Okay, fine. He has resources if he's going to get on ballots. Him running as a libertarian is way easier for him. First of all, they're on like every ballot, but that'll be formidable. Him running as a libertarian is extremely formidable.
Now, here's the thing. I know a lot of people think that if he runs as a libertarian, that's going to hurt Trump more than it's going to hurt Biden. I just think people are looking for an outlet. All numbers bear out that the scales are fairly even, but they tip in the direction of Biden in terms of there are more left voters going to RFK than there are right voters. I think that just comes down to the fact that Trump has a real base and Biden doesn't. And so by that measure, I think is going to result in some type of unique outcome. Now, I do believe the reason why RFK is planning to run as a libertarian, if he ends up doing that, is simply because of ballot access. Yeah. The type of heaven and earth that he has had to move with a lot of money on the table.
But his policy is not aligned with them. It's not like completely out of, he's more in line with them than with Democrats.
I would agree with that.
So, it makes just as much sense for him to run on the libertarian ticket than it would for him to run as a Democrat.
I think, again, it really comes down to how, it's no different than when Jesse Ventura tried to run on the Green Party ticket, and they basically told him that, no, unless you do exactly what we say, you can't do it.
Now, I don't think the libertarians are like that.
You don't know that.
No, we don't.
That
you know what? Here's what I can say. But in general, people that I have met are infinitely more reasonable and pragmatic than people that I've met that are Greens.
Now, I will say this about the libertarians, and I do believe
and I love my Green friends.
I do believe this much. If there is one difference I can say between the Greens and the libertarians, it's this. Do I think that the libertarians would make a sacrifice for one election cycle to get 5% of the vote and federal funding across the board for one election cycle? I believe they would do that before the Greens.
And why is it you think they would do that? Because they're more realistic and practical, because of the nature of people that are libertarian. And I don't agree with them on a lot of stuff, but they're not like Greens. As I've always said, it is too niche, and it's not widespread enough. It's not Main Street enough. People see Greens as just like the hippie tree hugger.
Mario, you got to understand, the YouTube ads help our channel.
Yeah, no, seriously. We just got remonetized, and it helps us. It helps us be able to pay Colin and Ben, and we're trying. No,
actually,
I know.
Double K, and we love you, but JFK wasn't so bad. If you're talking about RFK
No, you mean RFK Jr. She means RFK Jr. Yes. She means, and yes, I do think. I don't know that I completely classify him as a nut case.
No, he's nutty. He's
definitely crunchy.
Yeah.
But he's crunchy. Well, I think peanut butter.
Not smooth or crunchy.
Right, he's crunchy.
All right.
But I just, he's right on some things, and I don't think he is an evil insider working at the same level that Trump and Biden are. And yes, I think he's a little kooky on a lot of things.
This gets down to the same thing we've been talking about all along. If you have three people on the ballot between RFK, Trump, and Biden, who are you voting for? I think most people would probably lean towards voting for RFK.
Oh, I think Crunchy's nicer than Nutty. Crunchy's a little nicer than Nutty. And in all seriousness, if I was looking at a three-way ballot between Biden, Trump, and RFK Jr. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Now, here's the thing that's
It's a no-brainer.
interesting. And Trump did actually say this the other day. Trump is considering RFK as a running mate, but who are you to suggest that RFK would ever take a back seat to you?
He wouldn't. And I don't think, honestly, even if he were willing to take a backseat to somebody, it wouldn't be Trump.
And I really do believe right now that RFK thinks he's got a path to win this thing. Like, I think in his mind, if he gets on all 50 ballots, that he's going to have a means to getting this done. And if you look at the history of the third party runs, even the run of Ross Perot, in a number of states, mind you, the guy didn't know his ass off from a hole in the ground when it came to running a campaign. And yet there were a number of states where he got 30% of the vote. So he didn't win.
Oh, just lame conspiracy theory. He is not a bit off the rails when it comes to Palestinians. He is completely ignorant, completely wrong. And I'm not exactly sure, we've talked about it many times, that
I think he may be compromised on that issue.
I think he's compromised on that. I'm not sure why, but it is an APAC. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a Christian thing. I don't know. He's so wrong on it that really is my biggest problem with him. However, again, in a three-way race between those three, they're all wrong on that issue. So that would be a wash. Again, I support Cornel West. Everyone knows I'm a Cornel West supporter.
Now, one of the reasons why we do not have progressive solidarity on the left, unfortunately, and I do blame the Green Party for a lot of this, because they're such a dysfunctional, as Jen likes to say, suck it up, buttercup type of people, because they can't get out of their own way.
That's what I was just saying before about the difference between them and libertarians. Libertarians don't eat their own.
No. And the libertarians have gotten close to 5% in the past. If they get RFK on the ballot, they will get over 5%.
That's
a foregone. If Gary Johnson can get 3%, you're telling me RFK's not getting 5%? It's going to happen. Especially
Gary Johnson got 3%, and because I know he did better than Jill Stein, but
he might have even gotten closer to 4%.
All I know is, well, libertarians have where they do states more about Greens. But yeah, no, look, the Greens, and again, if what's on my ballot is Green Party, Libertarian Party, Republican, Democrat, I'm going to vote Green because that's just what I'm going to vote. But again, if Cornel West is on my ballot, that's where my heart is. But yeah. And the truth is, for people like me in Florida, even if I was somewhat of remotely interested in Democratic politics and their strategy in Florida, I would vote. You vote for whoever you want to anyway. It makes no difference here.
And the truth is, this left solidarity that I was trying to point out is that, because there's so much what you would call I can't think of the right word, but
narcissistic egomaniac infighting.
Well, the Green Party is just completely discombobulated. Like, they don't have any real direction. They're basically just a collection of very left, hippie-ish type of people who are really not concerned about what it takes to win electorally.
It's a lot of that. Okay, well, they're basically, that's the place where a lot of the socialists go. All right, there's a lot of socialists in the Green Party.
There is, but therein lies why I think it's also a party that's been sabotaged.
Well, it has been sabotaged, but they also sabotage themselves by doing stupid things. But I've always said it's too niche. It's too niche sounding. It doesn't. Yeah, we need a Labor Party.
But by that reckoning, and this is what I believe. The idea that Jill Stein is running for president when Cornel West is running for president makes absolutely no sense.
Well, I would see the two of them coming together at some point would be kind of ideal.
Not on the Green Party.
No, now it won't. No, but I honestly, I don't mind both of them running because there is a chance that Cornel West isn't going to get on all the same ballots.
That's
the
true.
Green Party is going to get on, and I, for one, would like to have some option in Florida.
But I think this also speaks to the greater problem, and RFK has been very vocal about this. If you want to run outside the two-party system, the two parties will come together and rain holy hell on you for attempting to get on another ballot.
They're best friends all of a sudden.
All of a sudden. And they don't care if it's somebody like a Jill Stein, if she gets on all 50 ballots, because Jill Stein's not a threat. RFK is a threat. And the second somebody who attempts to run is a threat, they will move heaven and earth to stop them. That's the point. You don't have to like RFK, but you have to recognize the numbers. All the polls that have been coming out consistently for months and months has him over 20%. That means that he's a threat.
He's a threat. And, well, honestly, I think that if they thought Cornel West, if he automatically had ballot access in all 50 states, he'd be a lot more threatening to them too.
The Green Party was able to get on 48 ballots in 2016. And when Ralph Nader ran in 2000, he was on 47 ballots.
They've never, I don't think they've ever gotten all 50.
I don't
but
think
it,
so.
but that doesn't matter. I mean, that really doesn't matter. If you get 48 out of 50, that's at least, that's good, right? Like that's a good showing. And it also depends on which states those are.
And Double K is right. Wisconsin does screw them. In fact, it was the Wisconsin Dems, I believe, that were able to successfully, I think it, well, or was it the GOP? I forget if they kicked off both the, actually they kicked off, yes, in Wisconsin, they kicked off the Green Party.
But they're closed primaries.
No, it's open primaries.
Then why does anybody
you're not listening. I'm talking about the general election in 2020. The Greens were successfully removed from the ballot. And in 2020, Jo Jorgensen, who was the Libertarian candidate, her vote share in that state was bigger than the disparity between Biden and Trump. Now, you can't just assume that if Jo Jorgensen was also removed from the ballot, that all those votes would have naturally gone to Trump.
No, a lot of them wouldn't have voted.
And Trump would have won the state. However, if there's one thing that is a clear-cut difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, you didn't hear a peep out of the GOP that Jo Jorgensen cost Trump the state of Wisconsin, which could have been a significant swing in the election in 2020. However, the Democrats want to remind you constantly that any vote that doesn't go to Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. And that's the logic. And that will never be something that should suffice anybody. That's why somebody like RFK is polling where he's at. That's why people are so desperate to have another option other than the two that is being presented.
And we do. It's just they're not able to get any sort of, like momentum and coverage is the problem. But we do. There are people. I mean, look, Vermin Supreme is still running.
That's true. So is somebody else who should have probably dropped out of the race, but I digress.
Some people just like to
have nothing else.
They have nothing else to do, I guess.
So, in my humble opinion, I think RFK very likely will run as a libertarian. I think it's very possible. I think if that is what he feels is his best path.
Can we please go back?
Getting on all 50.
I wish we could go back and look at when we first talked about him running and the whole conversation wherein I said he should run as a libertarian.
Well,
and everybody was kind of dismissive of that, kind of. Like I felt like people were like, well, that's kind of weird. And now it's like this is like as if, oh my God, he might run as libertarian. Yeah. Why would he not? Especially since they don't really have anybody. And when we asked Angela, like who, they have.
Yeah, I mean, there's no name that
she
just
listed a whole
out.
bunch of names, of people that nobody knows any more than we would know who Gary Johnson is, because I wouldn't have known who Gary Johnson is. So it does. I mean, for them to have RFK on their ticket would be like the first person of any note that they've ever probably had on their ticket in modern history.
Doug, yes, fusion voting is something I've also heard is very popular outside of ranked choice voting.
Fusion voting.
Anything that is going to give us an opportunity, in my opinion,
What's
I think will be very helpful.
Fusion voting?
Doug, can you please explain to Jen what fusion voting is? I think we all need to know.
Fusion voting?
What that option
It sounds
looks
like some fancy cuisine thing, like fusion. I always think fusion has to do with like fancy foods.
Guys, remember, for as little as $5 a month, you could go to patreon.com/generational change.
Support our little channel.
We certainly appreciate all the wonderful
our sad little techno challenged in my garage channel.
Yes, tonight has not been the best night, but it's been a great conversation.
What are you looking for?
The Lulu sticker.
What did you do with it?
Oh, did I put her somewhere?
I don't know. What did you do with the Lulu? I don't have it. I don't have it. It must be somewhere in your mess.
Well, anyway, you don't want me showing that.
No, I'm not showing anything.
But for those of you who have been here to support us this evening, one more time, let's run it back.
Also, we do have two. We have two. I don't know if you noticed, we had two new $5 patrons this week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, you scrolled them, but I don't think I didn't specifically say it.
We'll call them out in a minute. Big Dumb Animal. Again,
he's probably not even on here anymore. But when you're watching it back, thank you, Big Dumb Animal.
Double K, thank you so much for supporting Colin. He is our MVP. No two ways about it. Colin, the real backbone of Status Quo and these podcasts.
Yes.
He really is. To Shib and Dipole and Arunta.
$5. Shib and Dipole Arunta are our new patrons.
We really appreciate it.
And they were both out of, I want to say they came from the people that came on and were like, wait a minute, you're not bad. We like you.
Yeah.
I think they might have been with that. I think,
well, then, guys, keep making trash videos about us. We appreciate it.
I think they were from
it
that
definitely
group.
makes a difference. Thank you very much, Center Podcast.
Yes.
We definitely appreciate that support. And of course, our guests have been fantastic. Danny Wyndham, of course, our resident MMT.
You know that, and Randall, who is one of our new patrons, really wants to see you do James Carville, but you know, you got to work on that.
You mean James Carville?
But you got to be, that's more Lindsey Graham. I feel like your Lindsey Graham and your James Carville are kind of merged. They're merged. James Carville sounds a little bit more erratic.
No, James Carville from Louisiana wants to write you a text message and let you know that you got to vote for the Democrat Party. If you don't vote, listen, I am paid a lot of money to go on TV and tell you that it's the end of America as we know it because, you know, Putin
puppets.
Putin puppet. Hello, Vlad. Remember when Mr. Carville went on TV and insisted that it was Putin?
Okay, but see, and that's when that was considered so, like, he was such a wackadoo. Well, he is a wackadoo. But now you've got Nancy Pelosi suggesting that the people that are calling for a ceasefire are being funded by Putin.
Double K, thank you again. Is that
not the craziest thing?
It was a great piece.
Forget 80% of the Democratic Party wanting a ceasefire and more than half of Republicans, I believe. Like, we are well, and again, this is the most ridiculous conversation. But yes,
yes, we do wish that we did have more solidarity.
I try.
We can have it.
I try. I do the best I can to build as many webs with as many different groups and as many different people that I can. But the truth is, there's some people that you just cannot break bread with because they're just not willing to set their egos aside.
And you do have to set your egos aside, and you also have to recognize.
Yes, we need some more. See that you're not getting it. You're not. Yes.
Raging Cajun.
You're not getting Cajun versus Southern.
Raging Cajun.
No, now you sound like Forrest Gump.
Raging Cajun. I need to put a hat on.
Although Forrest Gump would have probably sound similar because he was from Alabama, so that would make sense.
Rainbow, Alabama. Yeah.
Are you gonna want to address the football situation?
Yes, it is unfortunate as we conclude this evening. The Detroit Lions, unfortunately, Cinderella woke up and forgot to put on her slipper at the 11 o'clock hour.
But I'm not as sad about that as the fact that we have to deal with Ken and Barbie in the Super Bowl.
Let me tell you, it is only going to get worse because it has been brought to my attention prior to the Chiefs winning the AFC Championship again that Taylor Swift has brought an additional $330 million in value to the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's awesome.
By dating
and you know what? Look, good for them, good for her. I don't care one way or the other. I find Mahomes annoying, but that's neither here nor there. So as of right now, and I never thought I would ever be saying this, but go 49ers.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. And I cannot believe that I'm saying that, but go 49ers.
Well, I think the 49ers have basically been I actually think there's a pretty good chance the 49ers are going to win because they've been this is not like a team that's come out of nowhere. They've been knocking on the door for 5 years now, and they had that Super Bowl in hand back in 20.
So guys, collectively, let's go 49ers.
Yeah, in 2020, in fact, I remember it was actually the one Super Bowl we actually did watch together with Rudy. We went over to Tijuana Taxi.
Oh, yeah,
and we watched it. Yeah, it was fun. It was,
I totally forgot that was even a Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, it was a fun game. I mean, look, San Francisco was leading by 10 with less than 7 minutes to go. But,
I think I had a beverage.
Kansas City had a huge comeback at the end. And
I just want them to go away.
Yeah.
I want them to go away. I'm finding Patrick Mahomes to be annoying. I'm finding him to be arrogant and crybaby, which I don't like.
I guess this is why our friendly conservative Ray Infinity really likes you, Jen, because he, of course, shares a very similar sentiment.
Right? It's like Mahomes' wife really does look like a Barbie doll. So, like, when they show her and Taylor sitting together up the booth, it looks like those ladies that AOC went and spoke to, just a younger version of those ladies.
It is
a lot of peroxide.
And unfortunately, you could say that,
peroxide.
Taylor Swift obviously has talent, and that is why she.
And therein is that. And here's the thing: I have no personal judgment about her.
But for people that are in those positions that have no talent, they just happen to have been along for the ride, and they can't get enough of the spotlight. Yeah. That's generally something that I think a lot of people would agree.
As to like between Taylor Swift and who she's dating, Kelsey,
that's it.
She wins in terms of, and if you want in terms of empire and net worth and all of that, she can buy and sell.
I wouldn't be able to complain about that.
I don't have any issue with her one way or the other. I really don't. I'm glad she's not the halftime show because it's not my style of music.
That's a cute idea, and maybe that might happen. But here's the thing. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift were probably dating for, I'm going to guess, somewhere between 6 months to a year before the public even knew about it. Yeah. They finally had decided that, okay, it's okay for people to know about this now. And so as a result, do I think he would do something like that? Maybe. But honestly, who cares? It's
not going past 4 years.
Wow. That's all you're giving him?
At best.
Wow.
How old is she?
I think she's 35.
Maybe. I don't know. She's just been through a whole lot of people. So I don't know. There's just some people that feel like, to me, there's just, if you just can't settle, sometimes it's just like you're not settled, and no matter who you go with, you are there. I don't know.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's just a question of feeling like it's on equal terms. And I do think that she sees him as her equal. And so maybe that's really what it comes down to. Look, unfortunately, some celebrities get that type of ego where they think the only people that are good enough for them are
they're
ones
both
that
34.
Okay, so I was off by a year.
So she's also having biological clock issues.
Maybe.
Well, at 34?
Well, she would love to.
34, she's having, I assure you, at 34, if she wants kids, she's having biological
So does she want to, considering her frame, does she want to produce, some, if it's female, some volleyball players, if it's male, some maybe baseball or football players, 5-star athletes?
I don't even know whether or not she wants kids. I'm just saying if she is somebody who does want to have kids and she's 34 years old, then that is something that is a deal. Exactly. Tick, tock. Because, well, let me tell you something. At 35, you're considered advanced maternal age. And at 35 is when they recommend that you get an amniocentesis, which of course is now null and void in Florida, because even if you find out something's wrong, you're already 6 weeks past the ability to do anything about it. So.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. But hopefully by November, we will have that taken care of. Where you will
actually, we're apparently we are under a 15-week ban now. Apparently, the 6-week ban is still not like the whatever. It doesn't matter. I live in a Handmaid's Tale hellscape.
Yeah, it's been fun, but you know what? Our numbers have been getting stronger. We're very happy to have you guys here, and of course, whether it's Ghislaine conspiracy theory, although I don't think it's a conspiracy, I think it's very real. You don't like my music? RC Quake fan, Ray Nelson, Mary. Scary Center Pod, Ray Infinity.
I think that when people start digging through the connections, really looking through and seeing the connections between all of that stuff and the Mossad and the Israel stuff, I think it's really interesting.
Well, that's our outpost in the Middle East. We know that's how.
I think that it's interesting.
Randall Giovanetti, Double K, of course. Danny Wyndham, of course. Linda Fontes, great to see you. You guys have all been great. Our show has grown recently, we've noticed, and it really does mean a lot.
We have Ryan Grimm
on Thursday.
1 o'clock. Afternoon. Ryan Grimm, he's one of those, he's got littles. So, he does the nighttime daddy thing.
We will continue our AOC conversation, which unfortunately we really don't want to do, but it's important, especially to have that conversation with Ryan, because he's been very supportive of them, almost, I think, to a fault in some cases. Well, AOC talks to him.
Yes. Well, and the truth is he gets a seat in the press room. And when you get a seat, you have to play a certain game or you don't get to keep that seat. There's a reason why people like him get invited to things, and somebody has to be on the inside.
But as I often like to point out, despite what Jimmy has to say, Ryan Grimm is actually a journalist.
Yes.
You don't have to like it, and you may not think his shtick is too fun or entertaining, but he has a job to do.
He's a little dry. I think Ryan's a little dry. But he's, you know what?
He's an honest actor.
He's an honest actor and he's a good guy. Now, the thing about it, and people don't realize that, is that if someone like Ryan Grimm, let's say on the inside, is really progressive, let's say inside he is like socialist, wants to get rid of borders and all that, it doesn't matter if he believes that, because him putting that out there and saying that, all that's going to do is eliminate his ability to have access to the places he has access. So to some extent, when you're in journalism and you're covering the White House and you're covering DC politics, in order to have access to cover anything, you have to still be within their realm and their spectrum of what's acceptable politics. Because if you're outside the acceptable politics spectrum, you don't get access.
Yeah.
And if you don't get access, there's no point.
No.
So we do need people, and I don't think Ryan is necessarily like a hippie progressive, but we need people to toe that line, or we do not have anybody on the inside. And I do believe that Ryan Grimm is somebody that is an honest actor and does have good intentions and really does want to see things be made better. And he does not support capital empire.
Oh, that sounds really great. So I like this Ryan Grimm. He does a really great job. And you make sure that you go over to patreon.com and give some money to this show. Come on, do it now.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe to all those wonderful
So that's
things
why
we
I
ask
get
you
mad
to
when
do.
people pick on Ryan. And also because as somebody who was a journalism person, so remember, I went to college for journalism. I actually have a master's in journalism. It is something I studied for
I
a
know,
very
we've
long
mentioned
time.
that a few times.
It's
You know, like,
important to
where
know.
did I go to college?
Rutgers.
Just saying.
Point being is that people don't understand how things work. They think that journalists and activists should be one and the same thing, and they're not the same thing. And nor should they be the same thing. We need journalists to be independent minded, and we need them to have access to places that have information. So I appreciate someone's got to play the straight man.
Yeah.
You know, it's really
Otherwise,
like that.
Otherwise, you're stuck with Dana Bash or Jen Psaki, and we certainly don't want to be
Somebody
stuck with that.
needs
Someone's
to play
gotta
the
do it.
straight man,
Someone's gotta do
and
it.
we need people like Ryan. And I think that it's important. And so I don't like when people give him grief. It's like they want everybody to be in this one radical activist category, except then how does that work? How do we have any access to anything then?
Fair enough.
Anyway.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things I ask you to do. The chat has been fantastic. Support has been even more fantastic. You guys are fantastic. We'll see you Thursday.